Welcome to Living Chronic, the podcast that explores the realities of living with chronic illness and disability while redefining how we thrive in our personal and professional lives. I'm your host, Brandy Schantz, a disabled veteran and chronic illness warrior, here to discuss the challenges, triumphs, and untapped potential of life with a chronic condition. Before we dive in, please take a minute to hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening. Now, let's change the way we think about disability together. Hi, this is Brandy Schantz, and you're listening to Living Chronic. Today, I'm speaking with Dr. Keith Ellis. He and I have a lot in common, although from very different perspectives. He has an interest in long COVID and has been studying this for some years. So, welcome, Keith.
Thanks for having me.
So, you've reached out to me, and I was so excited to get to know you and read some of your research and take a look at the supplements you've created. You've been studying long COVID, and of course, this is a problem that's growing every day. How did you first start, looking into this?
Sure. So my background is I'm a medicinal chemist. I'm a scientist. I'm a professor, right? So, obviously COVID changed the world, right? It's been a little bit different since 2020,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, in early 2023, I decided it had been kind of long enough. There was a growing body of science on long COVID, and I decided I wanted to look at a project for me kind of doing what I do.
Mm-hmm.
And what I do is kind of a medicinal chemist is um, from that chair and kind of the scientific ecosystem, medicinal chemists are really the people that do drug discovery,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we take a look at the pharmacology, the biology, the biochemistry that's known about a disease and the molecular targets that are out there, and we kind of pick ones to start working on, and then basically start the process of discovering drugs. And that's kind of what I've done most of my career, is what I would call early stage lead discovery. And
Okay.
I've mainly been focused in oncology. I kind of started out and did some work in antibacterials as well. And come early spring of 2023, it was one of those, well, COVID's been around long enough. There's a lot of papers being published.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of research being done. And I was particularly interested in long COVID. So I went to the literature and I kind of do what I would normally do with any project I'm trying to start. I'm learning about the disease state. I'm more of a molecular level scientist, right? So I'm trying to get deep into the details of, on a molecular level, what's happening in the body with the disease state, because that's basically what we need to know, and how we then design therapeutics in order to countervene whatever the disease is doing and make people healthy again,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that's kind of where I started the process. And after getting into the long COVID literature, that's when things kind of took a turn and went in an unexpected direction.
Yeah. And you really hit a lot, and have really gotten to the heart of what we're talking about. Um, I had never heard of microclots until you said the
Mhm.
word. And of course, I had to look it up, and I've been in that little wormhole for weeks. But
Comforting and not comforting at
no,
the same time.
exactly. Yeah, sometimes it's like, you know what? I want to know what is going on here. Let's get to the bottom of this. But then once you start getting there, you're like, oh gosh, I don't know if I wanted to know all this. Sometimes the truth really hurts, but
Yeah.
here we
Hmm.
are.
Yeah. So when I went into the long COVID literature, I was planning on starting what's a normal academic project for me, starting drug discovery, and I was kind of surprised and shocked, and maybe a little angry when I,
Hmm.
when I went through the literature and kind of took that like 100,000 foot view of what's going
Yeah.
on, right?
Hmm.
Because I was looking for very specific things. So I was looking for what we call pathophysiology,
Hmm.
and that is the understanding at a very molecular level of what actually is causing a disease state.
Hmm.
And when I got into the long COVID literature, there's not a lot out there on pathophysiology for long COVID. And
Right.
it was shocking because I knew the volume of research being done on long COVID. It was
Mhm.
also shocking because it's like, well, if you want to do anything about it, that's kind of the first set of questions you have to answer in order to develop therapeutics.
Right.
It's like, what are we doing here if we're not focused on that? And that was the part that kind of made me a little mad, right? It's like
Right.
we're dumping lots of money, we're dumping lots of time and energy and effort into long
Mhm.
COVID research, but there was really kind of a lack of focus
Right.
on the underlying causes at the molecular level.
Mhm.
So I kind of took a step back and I was like, well, that didn't go the way I planned. So I kind of started asking questions of like, well, what do we know? Where is the best information on the underlying causes for long COVID? And that's when I found the microclots hypothesis, which is some work that's been done by some really good scientists showing that long COVID, a potential hypothesis for really what causes long COVID is the formation of these microclots that are caused by viral proteins,
Mhm.
right? And the microclots actually are able to explain and account for a lot of the downstream symptoms of
Mhm.
long COVID. And there's been a lot of good work done in the literature about demonstrating that at a molecular level in really good, clear experiments that the COVID spike protein causes formation of microclots.
Mhm.
And basically, what these microclots are, they are unnaturally formed clots in the body. The spike protein binds to um, the normal proteins in the human blood that form clots,
Mhm.
and it causes misfolding of those proteins.
Mhm.
Okay. So you get these microclots that develop, and the microclots are sticky, and red blood cells stick to them, and platelets stick to them, and other proteins stick to them. And you end up getting these formations of these unnatural clot complexes in the blood, and that's what starts it causing a lot of the downstream symptoms like
Mhm.
the fatigue and the brain fog and the cardiac symptoms, and
Yep.
and it microclots can actually account for a large number, if not all, of the symptoms that we see associated with long COVID.
And for patients, this is frustrating,
Yeah.
obviously, because you're having all these symptoms and nobody can tell you anything. And I know many of us go from doctor to doctor to doctor,
Yeah.
and nobody can say for certain, well, this is what it is, or we can help you with this way or that way, or try this. It's usually just, well, it's probably, let's say it's fibromyalgia and call it a day.
Yep.
And that's not the right answer. We first met in person down in Richmond.
Hmm.
Are a professor at Virginia Commonwealth University. I serve on the Virginia State Rehabilitation Council. So our work really does collide, because right now we are helping a lot of people get some career rehabilitation because they're
Yeah.
unemployed due to long COVID. And this affects people's real lives. They're every day, wake up in the morning, what can I do to survive? Because I can't work whatever it is they may do with long COVID.
Yeah, and long COVID's really bad, and it's part of the reasons that I've done everything I've done is because it's really bad, right? So first, people get sick. It's the symptoms are very debilitating, right? But the symptoms are also all over the place,
Mm-hmm.
right? So most people have a core set of symptoms. They have fatigue to one degree or another. Sometimes the fatigue is they're just really tired and struggle through the day.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's they're not getting out of bed most of the
Yeah.
day, which really impacts your ability to be able to work and support yourself, support your family, have quality time with anything in life, right?
Yep.
So you've got fatigue, you've typically got brain fog as one of the core symptoms in long COVID, and then you've typically got some kind of cardiac involvement, whether it's inability to control heart rate or shortness of breath, especially if you're doing any kind of light exertion, like things that normally shouldn't give you shortness of breath are
Right.
giving you shortness of breath, and that can escalate all the way into inability to recover from exercise, what people call post exertional malaise
Mm-hmm.
or PEM, and then beyond those core symptoms, you've got this whole constellation where everybody seems to get different things, right?
Hmm.
So some people will have more severe cardiac symptoms, like the PEN, like POTS, where they get tachycardia when they stand
Hmm.
up. It's an inability to regulate the heart rate that's not caused by low blood pressure. It's caused by other reasons.
Hmm.
Dysautonomia, which is dysfunction in the autonomic nervous system, which controls heart rate and breathing and all the really important things that
The
we have
stuff
to do
we
to
have
live,
to do,
right?
yes.
A lot of people will have joint pain or muscle pain or muscle fatigue and
Hmm.
weakness. There's a whole set of neurological side effects that people are experiencing that are mostly thought to occur because of neuroinflammation, but it can be everything from the brain fog and the headaches to also anxiety and depression are
Hmm.
associated with long
Yeah.
COVID as well, which, and that's like a cause or effect. Is the long COVID causing that directly, or is at least some of that anxiety and depression caused by the fact that they're having trouble functioning in their
Yes.
life? So it's like a vicious cycle. A lot of people will also have GI issues. They'll have what's called gut dysbiosis,
Hmm.
or leaky gut. That could be issues that plays into what people think about as viral reservoirs and viral persistence as one of the causes behind long COVID, of virus actually kind of taking up residence in the GI tract and causing those GI issues, and sticking around and being what causes long COVID. And then there's also some, I mean, most people, there's some form of immune system involvement.
Hmm.
And how severe that is also kind of dictates how severe people's long COVID is. On the more extreme ends, it goes all the way things like mast cell activation and really
Hmm.
significant, almost autoimmune type response, are some of the more severe things, uh, immune effects that are occurring during long COVID, but that also kind of cycles back to the microclots, because one of the things that's been observed about the microclots is they cause the formation of autoantibodies
Hmm.
because the microclots themselves are unnatural. So they're also in their own way modulating the immune system, which just makes everything worse. Um,
You know, and for anybody who has not listened to this show before, to be very clear, nobody is 100% sure what has caused all of my own issues. I had a very severe reaction to Humira. As soon as I came off the Humira, I immediately started getting better. I also immediately got COVID. And, did they both work in tandem? Were they both fighting me? Was it one? Was it the other? There's no way we can know for certain. But I am a patient who has gone through this. I've been diagnosed with dysautonomia. I was diagnosed with the cardiac autonomic neuropathy. I was also diagnosed with POTS. So I know all of these very, very well. And, from the patient perspective, of course, nobody's talking about this in conjunction with long COVID. You're one of a very small few, or if you have been diagnosed with long COVID or dysautonomia, you're probably in one of our groups. And, we try our best to educate each other and help each other, sending, doctors that we know work on this, people who can help. But it's scary as a patient. The only thing I was told was you have cardiac autonomic neuropathy. And then they sent me home with a piece of paper saying that. So I Googled, well, don't do that, folks, because it just said, oh, well, you're going to die in 6 years. And I said, well, that's
hmm,
fabulous. They could have given me a better timeline. But the truth is, they don't even know. And whenever a doctor sees that in my chart now, I know they've read it because I'll see the sudden
hmm,
panic. They kind of do this stop and freeze, like, well, have you gotten a second opinion about this? And I'm like, well, who's the second doctor who knows what's going on? Tell me. And does he have appointments this year? Probably not.
right.
So it is frustrating from a patient's perspective because we're just trying to wake up in the morning and
Yeah.
go to work and take care of the kids and, you know,
Yeah.
meet up with a friend occasionally. And when you can't do that, it's it's devastating on many levels.
It is, and it's hard for everybody, right? So the patients are, we have a model and we have expectations, especially in this country, of I'm sick, I'm going to go to the doctor, they're gonna hopefully help me figure out what's wrong, and they're gonna help me and I'm gonna get better.
Yep.
That's kind of what we expect, and that's the way things have been largely up until we hit COVID, right? And the arc of healthcare in the US has been to make that the reality for more and more diseases. Even some of the things like cancers that were harder to treat 10 years ago are much more tractable
Hmm.
now to treat because of the work that's been done. So patients are truly suffering. And that's actually one of the other reasons one of the reasons I really do what I do is because they're getting very little help right now. They're
Hmm.
truly suffering, and there's just nothing to do for them. I do sympathize a little bit with the doctors because for a couple of reasons. One, people come in and the diagnostic criteria aren't even very clear, right?
No,
So that list of symptoms we went through, it overlaps with a bunch of other stuff.
all the stuff.
If you really look at the definition of what long COVID is, it is it's not a checklist, right? It's not something that's designed to be definitive. It usually starts with talking about persistence of symptoms from acute COVID infection that persist more than 3 to 6 months, and then you go from there. And when you look at long COVID from a definition like that, it's like you've gotten a little mostly better or almost all the way better from long COVID or from acute COVID, but then something persists past 3 to 6 months. And then typically you start getting sicker again, which is the
Hmm.
really bad part. And you get
Yes.
new symptoms, which is the really, really bad part, right?
Yes.
So from the patient point of view, it's horrible because 3 to 6 months is a long time to be sick anyway. But then once you're in long COVID, you're not getting any better, and there's not much the physicians can do to even help people. You go into your primary care, they're trying to figure it out. They don't really know what's going on other than what you tell them.
Hmm.
One of the worst and I think most heinous things about long COVID as a disease is when you do the clinical laboratory testing a physician would order. Somebody's
Hmm.
not feeling good, it all comes back and you look normal,
Yes.
which is just it's infuriating as a
Ugh.
patient. It's got to I can only imagine what it does to the doctors, right?
Yeah.
So but then you typically get shipped off from specialist to specialist. I know you've had that
All of them.
experience, right?
Yes.
And long COVID is this multi-system disease. It hits the cardiac system, it hits their neurological system, it hits the muscular system, it hits the GI tract. It
Everything.
hits the immune system. You've got all of this going on, and none of the specialties are really able to help with it, but so much. So it almost ends up getting lost in the cracks because there's not a way for the physicians to really deal with it more holistically.
No, you're right. And, I tell you what, as a Crohn's patient, I'll never forget when I finally really was diagnosed. I mean, that's when everything went. I mean, everything. I suddenly would stop breathing and I'd have to think to myself, oh, maybe I should breathe right now, which, trust me, if you've never felt that, it is a very odd feeling when you think, oh, no, I need to concentrate on breathing because I've never had to do that in my life. That's not
Mhm.
normal. But the worst part, as a Crohn's patient, and I have a very severe form of Crohn's disease, I all of a sudden started having symptoms of a blockage. And every Crohn's
Mm,
patient knows what a blockage is supposed to feel like. So that means you need to get into the ER ASAP.
yeah.
I also was having trouble swallowing and I couldn't eat. And I called my GI doctor and said that. And I was in for a colonoscopy quicker than you could blink.
Mm,
Because we all know what this is. I've been training for this since I was diagnosed. Oh my goodness, we're here. I have the cancer of the esophagus. I've got a blockage. This is go time. Don't stop. I'm going to die if we don't get in. And I went in, and the first strange occurrence was I was, taking that solution. Hadn't eaten in 3 days. Solution,
mm,
solution, solution. I was still nothing moved. Nothing. Most bizarre moment of my life. Nothing. And my doctor said, why, what's happening? And I said, I don't know. I don't know. And she was concerned. I was concerned. Even though I was having trouble swallowing and severe pain, it
mm,
felt like I had terrible GERD. And, people with GERD knows how that
mhm,
feels. I had nothing. There was no acid. The only thing she could see was probably food just coming back up, and that was causing it, but it was not acid. And when your GI doctor, who you depend on, is looking at you with the same puzzled look, and you're both like, wait, what happened? It's a terrible feeling.
Yeah.
But I was seeing a neurologist at the time, and I told him what happened. I said, "Well, we ran in. It was go time. This was it. Blockage and cancer, and nothing." And he said, "Oh no, I know what this is." And then that's when he did the testing for dysautonomia. But it's a terrible feeling. It's a terrible feeling, especially when the doctors who are certain they probably know what's going on find out, wait, no, this isn't cancer at all. It's what is it? you know, what's happening?
Yeah. So, and with the long COVID patients, a lot of them are going to the doctors and just nothing nothing
No,
happens. They're on their own to go to Google to
yeah,
figure out what they can do to try and help themselves and try and feel better.
you're right. And to be fair, um, this is also a very difficult time for doctors. They're overworked.
Yeah.
A lot of doctors left the field during the pandemic. They were
Yeah.
overworked. They were exhausted, stressed out. There's also, I can't remember. I think it's almost half of all practices are now owned by a corporation,
Yep.
and now the doctors have quotas they have to meet. They have to see a certain number of patients every day. They have to do a certain number of tests to make the practice profitable. So there's a lot of stuff going on at one time. In addition, and you and I have discussed this a little bit, there's just not a whole lot being done by the agencies that you would expect to be doing more to help us, NIH, FDA,
Mhm.
to push down information and get that out to both doctors and patients in a very easily digestible manner. Doctors don't have time, don't send them. I FOIA'd all of FDA's information once and found out that the quarterly report they send to doctors on the adverse reaction database and updates to that is in a text file the size of
Yep.
my house. So, I mean, you know, for those of you who weren't born yet in 1992, that is how we used to do things in 1992. But, obviously, it doesn't make anything easier for the doctors as well.
So, and it's one of those where when you look at the whole picture, it's like you see the things that aren't happening, you see the things that are happening, and it's like, well, you know, in trying to give everybody leeway that everybody's doing the best they can, but it's like, you start asking questions about, can we do this a better way, right?
Yes.
So NIH has poured a ton of money into long COVID research, but I'm constantly hearing all the long COVID patients being like, where'd all the money go?
Yeah.
Why has nothing changed since all that research money went in? And I get it, because unfortunately science takes time, right? It
Yes.
takes time to do studies, it takes time to learn things. It especially with a new disease, right?
Hmm.
Long COVID didn't exist 5 years ago,
Right.
right? So it's a brand new disease. It is going to take time, but at this on the other hand, it's there does seem to be, the patients do seem to have a point that of nothing seems to be done with any kind of urgency or a
Right.
lot of prioritization or focus on, hey, can we start asking the questions scientifically that will have the biggest impact right now and lead us to the fastest track to
Hmm.
actually start developing some drugs, because it doesn't seem like the priorities are being set that way, which is why I think everybody's really frustrated. The scientists are doing we're doing things at normal speed, which isn't really what you want under the circumstances for long COVID. And the way my context for this is also thinking about oncology research,
Hmm.
right? 10, 15 years ago, we could not do nearly what we do with research in oncology that we do now. That we have so much more sophisticated tools and assays and way to ask and answer questions. And in the last, especially 10 years, there's been a big emphasis on oncology, on doing research that is fast tracked to help develop new therapeutics, help patients, sooner rather than later. The old
Right.
way of just spending 20 years studying it and then maybe we'll figure it out, especially in oncology, we don't really treat it like that anymore.
Hmm.
But that's the attitude that seems to be pervasive right now with long COVID research, which is what I don't understand from where I'm sitting, right? Because I need people to do more work to be able to get me the data I need to be able to actually start working on new therapeutics,
Exactly.
which is why I ended up not going that way and going a different way, because there wasn't a path for that in the literature.
And that's something I know as patients that we appreciate. I know that science strangely became politicized for the last
Yeah,
4 years, 5 years now. Good gracious, I'm depressed thinking about that. But at the end of the day, I really don't care. I just need to get up in the morning and go to work. I don't want to file for disability. I don't want to spend the rest of my life tired and in bed, unable to breathe, gasping for air. That's not what I want for my life.
yeah,
And that's great. I mean, and obviously everybody chooses a different job, right? Some people just want to do nothing. They never want to see a person. They want to sit in their office and do a 25-year research project and solve a very difficult problem that nobody else is looking at. And other people want to be in that ER, go, 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 go. And I need somebody in between there to
yeah.
just get me out of the door. And you did think about that, and I appreciate it. And you thought about that in your company's science driven supplements. And you have
Mhm.
two very focused supplements to help people with long COVID. So tell me a little bit about those.
So when I finished looking at the scientific literature, I found the microclots hypothesis. Okay, I said this is something I can work with. And the researchers that were working heavily in the microclots area, they did a small clinical trial with a pharmaceutical treatment. So they took about 90 long COVID patients and they tested them for microclots. They confirmed they actually had microclots using a laboratory assay. And then they treated them with a therapy called triple anticoagulant therapy. And it's a combination of three pharmaceutical anticoagulants. So it's pretty strong stuff. So, and depending on how severe the person's long COVID was, they were on it for anywhere from 2 to 4 months for the mild long COVID, and like 4 to 6 months for the severe long COVID patients.
Hmm.
And at the end of the study, when they looked at everything, about 80% of the patients had recovered from long COVID, including they reran the assay for the microclots. The people that recovered, their microclots were gone. So that's a pretty good starting point. So
Hmm.
as I was getting into the project and I started meeting and talking to more and more patients with long COVID, a lot of people knew about triple anticoagulant therapy, but nobody could get their hands on it. And I said, well, that's interesting. So I started thinking about why and looking into why. And there's kind of three different issues with it. One, it's three anticoagulants together that are these are serious drugs, right?
Hmm.
They're very potent. They were optimized to really be anticoagulants. Putting three of them together creates a pretty large safety risk for bleeding as a side effect,
Hmm.
right? So one issue is it is somewhat of a risky therapy to even give people. Requires a lot of monitoring for clotting factors and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
So that was issue number one. Is in and of itself there's some risk. Issue number two is for most of the long COVID patients I would talk to, their physicians wouldn't prescribe it. And I think that's kind of a two-parter. That's the physicians know, hey, this is kind of dangerous. This isn't something to mess around with. I'm not sure I feel comfortable giving that to somebody and sending them home if they're sick and they have long COVID. And then number two, there's only been a small study on it, right? There
Hmm.
hasn't been a large randomized placebo controlled clinical trial, which seems to be what we have to have for everything now, where we
Right.
can't do anything, which is another frustrating thing. and,
Hmm.
and I get having to test everything and making sure it's safe and it works, but doing nothing because you don't have that is also its own kind of downside,
Right.
right? And then the third issue with it is the physicians that are prescribing it, and there are some of the long COVID clinics in the country where you can go. They have long wait lists to get in, but they will test you for microclots if you have them, and they'll give you triple anticoagulant therapy, but insurance won't always pay for it.
Right.
And these are not cheap drugs,
Right.
right? They're really expensive. So there's a safety issue, there's an accessibility issue, and there's a cost and affordability issue. So I looked at all of that and kind of said, well, what can I do about that? And let me back up and tell you a little bit more about my background that makes this make sense. So um, I did my PhD in natural product total synthesis. We were basically making natural products because they had some kind of interesting biological activity that people were interested in studying, and as a way to just develop new chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I did my training in medicinal chemistry, my mentor, and in my early career when I was independent, I was basically using natural products as starting points to try to develop new drugs. So that was kind of, and we have shifted away from that in general for science writ large,
Mm-hmm.
right? Most of the pharmaceutical companies have closed all their natural products programs. We don't really do it that way anymore, but that's kind of the way I was trained,
Mm-hmm.
and I did that a lot early in my career. So when I saw the situation with triple anticoagulant therapy, it was basically too potent, and what you really needed was a safer, accessible, and affordable version of triple anticoagulant therapy that did the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, okay, I know how to do that. So basically, what I did was I flipped the script of what I was originally trained to do and did early in my career. Instead of starting with the natural product and trying to develop pharmaceuticals, I flipped it around and I started with the pharmaceuticals and I
Mm-hmm.
reverse engineered the therapy, starting with the pharmaceuticals, reverse engineering through the mechanism of action of the drug back to, and I found natural ingredients that had the same mechanism of action that are less potent, so they're safer,
Mm-hmm.
and they were in natural ingredients that you could formulate together into a supplement that would be available over the counter. So that gets you a better safety profile, right? So most of these natural ingredients, and we're talking about things like turmeric and white willow extract and a traditional Chinese medicine called dian shen. It's an
Mm-hmm.
extract. You get to something that is natural. It's going to be less potent, but it's safer. There's a lower bleeding risk. It's available over the counter and it's affordable. And it does seem to help people with their long COVID.
And that's the stuff we need. That's the stuff we need. So, I know I'm grateful,
Thank you.
because it's what we need, science-driven supplements. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put your website in the notes, because that's what we need. And of course, it's difficult right now. Here's kind of the difficult part of the whole episode today. There does need to be a lot of change. We talked about NIH, and they're just not, doing the stuff to get directly to the patients to help us, just get up out of bed and go to work. And that's the stuff that matters to us. Somehow science did get politicized.
Yeah.
And, you it's very difficult to have a good, honest, and intelligent conversation about what's happening right now. And nobody seems to get it, trust the science. Well,
Yeah.
there's nothing that sounds more anti-science than that in so many ways, because you're always learning something new. No scientist ever says, well, there it is, the science, and then stops. Every scientist wants to keep going and learn more and more, because there's this vast amount of knowledge out there that we just don't have yet. And then, of course, on the other side, yes, you can trust an expert occasionally. They,
Right.
they know. So we need to find, you and I were both talking about, there is a lot of real estate in between RFK Jr. and Dr. Fauci.
Yeah.
I think we can find somewhere in that big vast area to have a good conversation with each other, because we do need to make change. Nobody should have to go through this.
Well, and we've evolved to this place where we evolved to a new paradigm in science, and it's like we threw away the old one, and we don't understand that there's kind of downside consequences for doing that. It used to be 50 years ago. We tended to use more natural type remedies. We tended to use things in the meantime while drugs were being developed,
Hmm.
right? And in the 20th century, a lot of the drugs that were FDA approved actually were either natural products themselves, like a lot of the oncology drugs like
Hmm.
Taxol. That's a natural product, right? Or were in some ways invented from, or maybe the biology was um, characterized and we had an understanding of the biology because of some kind of natural product that eventually led then to the development of a really potent pharmaceutical drug. And I don't know, I always kind of understood it's like, well, there's always a time for most diseases where you don't have a drug yet.
Mm-hmm.
And we use these other tools that we have in the meantime as long as they're safe, right? And yes, they're not going to be effective in everybody, but you let people try and do what they can in the meantime until science and pharmaceutical industry has time to develop actual real drugs for conditions. It's like we've gotten to this place now where, because science is so sophisticated, because we know how to develop pharmaceuticals so well, we can't do anything to help anybody until we have that pharmaceutical developed.
Right.
But nobody is remembering it takes 10 to 15 years to develop new drugs, particularly for a new disease state that didn't exist 5 years ago. So, in the absence of something like the cancer moonshot type
Right.
initiative that NIH had, what are you going to do in the meantime? You almost have to start thinking about these types of more natural remedies.
Yes.
The long COVID community's already been doing it since long COVID kind of started. What I did that's different is I took the known science about what is happening in long COVID and the mechanisms, and I custom formulated something to replicate a pharmaceutical cocktail that looks like it really does work for microclots into something that people could get their hands on and was easier to take and safer to take.
Mm-hmm.
And it does seem to actually be working for a lot of people.
And thank goodness for that. Thank goodness for that. Because that's, and I think for many of us, certainly myself, having that more natural
Yeah.
drug to take is preferable. Um, I know that they will come up with something, but I've also learned the hard way that even once a drug is FDA approved, they still don't know all the side effects.
Yeah.
Now the Crohn's Colitis Foundation is doing safety studies to study just how safe these biologic drugs are that we take in the long term. You know, so there's just a lot of stuff out there that we just aren't discussing. I think often people say, "Well, patients, they're dumb. No, don't even bother." And what we really need to be doing is stopping the politicization and don't talk about it,
Yeah.
and talk about it. Talk about it a lot. Get it out there. Let's talk, what do you want to try? What do you need? Let's get stuff down to patients. Let's get people understanding what's going on and making,
Well,
good decisions for themselves.
and it's about letting patients have choices,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Like that's one of my big things is I understand people. There's a lot of people that don't like pharmaceuticals, don't want to take
Hmm.
them. They want more natural alternatives. Great, here's a natural alternative for you. But I understand there's people that want the pharmaceutical drug. They don't want the natural options. Well, okay, I totally get that. Then you have to wait till we develop the
Right.
pharmaceutical, right?
Right.
But in my book, it's everybody needs to be able to have the information and be able to make choices for themselves, because it seems like the choice that's being offered to the long COVID community is go home. We'll make you as comfortable as we can. We'll treat whatever symptoms we can with the available, mostly over the counter
Hmm.
products, maybe a few pharmaceutical products, and you're just going to have to wait till science figures out what the real solution is for you. And that doesn't seem like a the right thing to do to
Right.
people.
No, you're right.
Um, and my goal was really to put all this together. So I did all the research. As I was doing all the research, I wanted it free for everybody to see. So I published it all on Substack. It's all out there, and then I made videos about it and put those up on YouTube and TikTok, so people could go check it out and make a decision for
Right.
themselves. But at the end of the day, it's here's something that could potentially help you, that you could try if you want to.
Hmm.
And if you don't want to, hey, I won't be offended. I
Yeah.
get it. You're waiting for better science and better pharmaceuticals. And I trust me, I get that, right? I'm inside the system. I understand what you want. But in the meantime, here's something for people to try that don't want to wait.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. This is a long road. I feel so much better knowing that people like you are out there putting in the work, doing the research, and having the conversation because we need to have more conversations. We can't just live in this world where nobody's allowed to question anything and you have
Yeah.
to exist on one of two, far ranges of ideas rather than trying to reach out and understand more.
Yeah.
um, you and I met in person for the first time the day after the election. This isn't a political show, it's a health show, but you know what? You know, I live in the DC
Mhm.
area and, this is America, this is what we do. And I've often said, you know, you have to understand what people are feeling. And when you have, a system here in DC that clearly seems to look down upon everybody, well, you just wouldn't understand it, so don't ask questions. And you've got a bunch of people just existing on these two far end spectrums of different things: trust no one, trust everything, never have a conversation on either side. I
Yeah.
think, you're starting to see where people are fed up because we just need somebody to talk to us. I, you know, I've gotten a lot of pushback because I keep saying, you know what, RFK Jr. He's going to push making us ask questions, and I like that. I don't agree with RFK Jr. on a lot of things, but I really enjoy that we're at least asking questions. Thank goodness. That's what it that's what we need. Talk, ask questions, get to the bottom of things. Maybe NIH isn't doing the right things like we were talking about FDA. I'd give my left arm to get in there and get to work on doing some stuff in the FDA to make it better. We have to have a conversation or nothing's ever going to get better, right?
No, absolutely. And I know I told you when we met for I understand that perspective. So I grew up in Northern Virginia. I grew up in
Mm-hmm.
the DC area. My dad worked for the federal government my entire life, right, until he retired. So I understand the kind of the culture and how it is up there. And we've just arrived at this place where bureaucratic inertia and bureaucratic thinking has completely replaced any kind of common sense
Yes.
and thinking. I don't even want to call it thinking outside the box. It's just taking a step back and saying, is what we're doing really making a difference? And is
Yes.
it mattering to the people that it needs to help?
Exactly. My God, Keith, I tell you, as I've been going through this journey, I was banging my head against the wall trying to get doctors at the Veterans Affairs Hospital in DC
Mm,
to get me into an MRI because I had severe migraines and I couldn't even see. I mean, it was terrible. And when I kind of lost my cool and just screamed, they thought, "Oh gosh, she must be suicidal now, veteran in crisis." And the next thing I
I
know,
know.
I have 500 phone calls coming to my house. "Hi, Brandy. My name's Steve, and I'm a combat veteran too." And I'm like, I'm not suicidal, guys. I mean, I'm angry, but there's probably 5,000 people working at VA right now whose only job is to call you and say, "I hear that you blew a gasket." Where was the guy to stop me from blowing a gasket? All I needed was an MRI.
Yeah.
So,
No,
I mean, different
and
bureaucracy, but yeah, guys, what?
well, and again, it goes back to it is the fundamental question we're asking: how do we actually help people and help
Yes.
improve their lives now, or are we interested in just doing things that might improve their lives eventually?
Right.
And
And
that's
that's a good
this
question
is
to
one of
ask.
the it's one of those things. I've got this kind of thing that I've been doing with a lot of papers I've been reading now, and I've started categorize them kind of mentally. Is this a study, or is this somebody actually trying to find a solution for something?
Oh, thank you.
Because almost every study will end with some type of therapeutic relevance of what they have, their findings in their study. But if you really sit down and look at what that therapeutic relevance is, it's a might help in 10 years.
Hmm.
Or they're proposing a new customized humanized antibody to solve a problem that it's like, wow, I really don't think you need all that to get the job done. But
Yep.
obviously, you think there's an interesting line of research between where you are and there.
Yes.
And they're all studies. It's, one of the reasons I was really attracted to the microclots hypothesis is because it started advancing a path to get to real solutions.
Yes.
And I've been disappointed in the long COVID literature because there's not more work like that.
And we need more work. And some of that could come from, changing how we, put out money. I,
Yeah.
um, I talk about this all the time, and as a matter of fact, I've got an episode coming up focused on this. I was an Army officer. I can tell you with great detail what happened post 9/11, and we spent over $80 trillion, and I remember, those days. It was just wild. It was the wild, wild west. Money just getting thrown everywhere, and it came to a point where it was like, well, wouldn't this be cool? And then next thing you know, $500 million is going towards something that could be kind of cool. And we were not focused on actual solutions at all. And now we see it again with long COVID. And, for goodness sakes, if we could just improve our bureaucracy even 10% before
Mhm.
the next big crisis, please, because throwing money at the problem and finding something cool versus something that isn't a more immediate solution. Of course, we always need long range stuff. I mean, every
Yeah.
strategic planner knows we need to be looking out 10, 20, 30, 40 years as well. But, you know, we have a more immediate need. And right now, that's getting people back to work. The Rehabilitation Council, we're doing everything we can to try to rehab people. Maybe you used to stand in a bakery all day long, and now you can't do that because you have long COVID. So let us help you find a job where you can sit all day long,
Yeah.
stuff like that. But that's the difference. That's what we need. Those immediate needs. People need food now. They need to pay their mortgage or their rent now. Helping them 20 years from now is not going to keep them in their home.
Right. And that's really why I developed CircuGuard. Is my product for
Hmm.
helping them recover from long COVID microclots. Is if I could just get them something that makes them 20, 30, 50 feel 50% better,
Hmm.
and they can actually get out of bed and work a little bit. They can actually get out of bed and spend time with their kids.
Yep.
They can they maybe they don't miss the event with their kids that week
Yes.
because they're feeling so crap because of everything else they had to do. It gets them feeling better and gets them on the road to recovering, because I think what we're eventually going to see is, with long COVID, that if we can get people back on the right track to being healthier, I think there's a large immune system component with long COVID.
Hmm.
It seems to hit people that were already had stressed immune systems,
Yes.
and it's like if you can just get them on the way, on the path to being better, then at some point the body can do a little bit of the work itself,
Yes.
to help recover. And that's kind of the direction this is going, especially since there's not going to be much else coming down the pike
No.
anytime soon.
And that's what we need. So thank you for that. I could probably talk. We could probably do 10 episodes because I have a lot of thoughts, and there's a lot of things we need to change. And
Mhm.
I'm just excited to try to start a conversation, whatever
Yeah.
prompted that conversation. My interest is helping people just like yours. So opening up those doors and opening up that conversation, and just get people talking again. And you know, it's
And
a
that's why,
reminder.
say what you want about RFK Jr., right? Say
Yeah.
what you want about him, but the whole "Make America Healthy Again," I think a lot of people are on board for that
Yeah. Heck
because
yeah.
of everything you say. Like the doctors and the scientists, are they really helping us or not, or is there some other answers someplace else?
Yes.
And that's part of that middle that you
Yes.
talked about, right? That people really are wanting and are open to, and that doesn't have to have the solution for everyone,
Right.
but it can have options that everybody can consider.
And that's what we need. I mean, I don't, I could open up a can of worms here. I'm going to use some self restraint, but yeah, that's exactly what we need. Each person is different. I walked into this pandemic immunocompromised Crohn's disease patient. My husband walked into this pandemic. relatively healthy but slightly overweight and over 50. Other people walked into this pandemic 25, athletic and, not a
Mhm.
care in the world. And all of us had different outcomes.
Yeah.
So expecting all of us to be treated the exact same is really not feasible.
Yep. Well, and if there's one thing both acute COVID infections and long COVID has shown us is they're like equal opportunity
Oh,
diseases.
heck yeah.
They will take victims from just about
Oh,
anywhere. There's been a lot of work lately, and I haven't had a whole lot of time to go into it about long COVID prevalence in children is a lot higher than people think
oh,
it's
wow.
been.
I didn't know that.
Um, I've had a couple conversations with people about, and it's somewhat anecdotal, but there seems to be a high prevalence of long COVID in super fit people and endurance athletes,
Mm-hmm.
marathon runners, triathletes, probably because they already had a very stressed immune system from the intensive training
Right.
that made them more vulnerable to long COVID.
Yeah.
So the diseases are equal opportunity. They're going to go after who they go after, and um, it would serve everyone better to have and more of an open mind and more compassion for allowing somebody else to make a decision for themselves that's maybe different than you'd make for yourself.
Exactly. And I think that's the takeaway. I think it's especially become worse over the last 10 years. But with social media and the internet, the more people get out there, the more information we have, the more we've kind of turned into a nation of people who speak in memes. And, if you're just throwing out memes and you have to choose one side of two, that's not
Mhm.
intellectual at all. And that's not solving problems. If you're going to solve problems, you got to get everybody at the table. You got to get everybody having a good discussion. And that means that, there's good points over here, there's good points over here, there's good points in between. And we need to open our minds and listen to those various different points instead of shutting everybody down who's not 110% on our, teams, because that's just not doing anybody any good, and I always tell people I'm very honest because I've gone through so much. Here I am, the educated upper middle class DC suburbs lady, and no, I got hurt pretty bad in this whole thing. And people not knowing how to say the words, I don't know, let's discuss, really
Yeah.
hurt me in very bad ways. Um, I always think about something an old mentor told me many years ago. And he said, the way you can tell somebody is educated and intelligent is they know how to say the words, I don't know, but let me find out. I don't know. I don't have enough education on this. I don't know. I don't have the expertise required to form an opinion, but I'll take a look at some things. Anytime somebody does not have the ability to say, I don't know, that's your first indication that they are not educated nor are they intelligent.
Or at the very least, they are closed-minded to
Yeah.
anything
And I think
beyond their own experience and knowledge.
and I think that's just very endemic of what we're going through with social media. Everybody's picked a side. It's getting worse if you're, on one side you're still on Twitter, or maybe you've been in Truth Social for a long time, and if you're on another side now, you're over at Blue Sky or Threads, and never the two to meet again, I guess.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So maybe I don't know. Maybe we can get everybody starting a conversation. At the very least, people can go, yeah, your Substack, Keith Ellis, PhD. You have a lot of great research there,
Mhm.
science driven supplements. That's going to be in the episode notes. I
Mhm.
love your X, formerly known as Twitter, Keith
Yep.
Ellis, PhD, long COVID conversations, Q&A. Great information. Let's keep this conversation going. Let's keep talking. Let's keep pushing the buttons. And thank you for doing so much to help
Sure.
patients.
And I'll also make sure you put in the show notes my keithclsphd.com.
Yes,
That has links to everything.
perfect.
And actually, there's a link on there people can email.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Thank you so much. This has been a really great episode. Hopefully, you have time to do another. I'd love to dive into the stuff that I
Absolutely.
refused to ask questions about this episode.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Living Chronic. If you could please take a moment to rate and review and share this podcast, this is the best way to help this platform grow and create a community. In the meantime, you can follow along all the social platforms with the handle at Brandy Schantz on Blue Sky and X, and Chronically Brandy Schantz on Instagram and Threads. Don't forget to check out my website, brandyschantz.com. Have an amazing week and see you next time.